closing happened on a Thursday. I remember that specifically because I'd taken the day off work and I sat in the parking lot of the title company for almost 10 minutes before going in. Just sat there. I couldn't explain it to anyone who asked. I just needed a moment where it was still real, but I hadn't touched it yet. Hadn't made it ordinary by signing papers and shaking hands. I'm 29 years old. I've been working as an occupational therapist for 6 years. The last 4 of them at a pediatric clinic that runs short-staffed most of the time and pays okay but not great. I shared a 2-bedroom apartment with a roommate named Sandra, who is perfectly fine as a person, but has a boyfriend who considers our couch his second home. For 2.5 years, I put away money every single month. Not exciting amounts, just quiet, steady amounts. I skipped the girls' trips. I brought lunch to work. I drove a car with 140,000 miles on it because it still ran, and running was enough. The condo I bought has 2 bedrooms, a small balcony that faces west so you get the evening light, and a gas fireplace I will probably never use but felt good about. It's in the quiet part of a suburb 20 minutes outside the city. The HOA is reasonable. The neighbours on my floor are an older couple who keep to themselves and a woman around my age who smiled at me when I moved boxes in. I closed on a Thursday, moved in over the weekend with the help of 2 friends, and by Monday I had my kitchen unpacked and my bed set up, and I stood in my living room at 7 in the morning with coffee and just listened to the quiet. That lasted 4 days. My older brother called on a Friday afternoon. I was on my balcony when my phone buzzed. I saw his name and answered without thinking, the way you do with family. We're not close in the way people mean when they say close. We don't call each other just to talk, we don't text photos, we don't have inside jokes anymore. But we're not estranged. He's 35, married with 3 kids, living about 90 minutes away in a house that's always felt slightly too full even when I've visited under normal circumstances. Hey, he said. So, good news. We finally figured out the renovation situation. I didn't know what renovation situation. I said so. He laughed, the easy laugh he uses when he's about to tell me something I won't find easy. The kitchen. We've been dealing with water damage under the subfloor for months, you know that. Insurance finally came through. We're getting the whole thing gutted and redone. I said that was great. I meant it. Yeah, so the contractor can start Monday. It's gonna take about 3 weeks, maybe 4. We can't cook anything, obviously, and with the dust and everything it's basically unlivable. I waited. We figured your place is perfect. He said, 2 bedrooms and the kids can camp out in the living room. You've got space. We'll be there Sunday afternoon, probably around 4. That works, right? I want to tell you I said something immediately. I want to say the words came fast and clear. They didn't. What I heard, in the silence after his voice stopped, was the sound of my own coffee cooling. The sound of the neighbour down the hall closing her door. The sound of 4 days of quiet that I had earned and saved for and waited for. He wasn't asking. The shape of his words was asking, but he'd already said Sunday. He'd already said we'll be there. He'd already said it works. Right, which is not a question, it's a confirmation request. He was calling to tell me, not to propose. Who is we? I said. Me, Brielle, the kids. A pause. My mother-in-law is coming down to help with the kids while we deal with the renovation stuff. She's staying too. My brother's wife Brielle is someone I have tried, for 8 years, to like. I don't dislike her exactly. We just exist on different frequencies. Her mother, Ruth Ann. And I realise I just used a name, so let me be precise. I'm not using her real name, but she is real and she was coming to my home. Is a woman who once rearranged my sister-in-law's kitchen without asking and then complained it still wasn't right. That's 5 people, I said. 6. Brielle's sister is going through some stuff right now. She might come stay with us for a bit. She'd probably be there too. 6 people. In my 2-bedroom condo that I had owned for 4 days. I haven't even unpacked my bathroom yet, I said. That's fine, we're not picky, he laughed again. It's family, you've got room. The words "you've got room" landed somewhere in my chest and just sat there, heavy and presumptuous and completely confident in themselves. I told him I had to call him back. He said sure, but said it the way someone says sure when they've already made the decision and the callback is a formality. I hung up. I stood on my balcony for a long time. Here is what I knew. My brother was not malicious. He was careless in the way people become careless when someone has always accommodated them. Growing up, I was the younger one who adjusted. The one who moved to the smaller bedroom when he needed the bigger one for studying. The one who gave up the car on weekends. The one who, at Thanksgiving, helped in the kitchen and stayed quiet when the conversation moved past me. Accommodation had become my default, and his expectation of it had calcified into something that looked, to him, like simple logistics. I also knew that if I said yes, 6 people would be in my home for 3 to 4 weeks, and I would spend those weeks managing my own feelings in my own space, and by the time they left, I would resent the walls. I called my closest friend, Tamsin. She picked up on the second ring and I told her what happened. She was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "Tell him no," she said. "He's my brother. Tell him no anyway. Where are they supposed to go? That is his problem to solve, not yours." I knew she was right. I had known it, honestly, from the moment he said we'll be there. But knowing something and doing something about it are 2 completely separate skills, and I had spent 29 years developing one of them very thoroughly. Tamsin stayed on the phone with me while I thought out loud. I said I felt guilty. She said guilt and obligation weren't the same thing. I said they were family. She said family don't assume, they ask. I said maybe it wouldn't be that bad. She said nothing, which was its own answer. By the time I hung up, I had decided I was not going to let 6 people move into my home that I'd owned for 4 days without being asked, for a month. I called my brother back. He picked up sounding like he was already making plans. I said, "I'm sorry, but I can't do that." A long pause. Can't do what? I can't have 6 people stay here. I just moved in. I have no space set up for guests. I'm not prepared, and honestly, you didn't ask. You told me. Another pause. This one different. Cooler. "It's family," he said. "I know. You have 2 bedrooms, one of which is mine. The kids can share a room. Betrayal and I take the other one. The living room is fine for my mother-in-law and her sister. That's not how I want to start living in my home." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I didn't realise you'd be like this about it." There it is, I thought. There's the shape of it. Be like this. As if having an opinion about who sleeps in my home was a personality flaw. "I'm not being like anything," I said. "I'm telling you it doesn't work for me." He said he'd have to talk to Betrayal. He did not sound warm when he said it. He hung up before I could say anything else, and I stood in my kitchen in the condo I'd bought with 6 years of careful living, and felt the specific discomfort of having said a true thing that someone didn't want to hear. What happened over the next 2 days was a full family response. My mother called Saturday morning. She opened with, "Your brother mentioned you might have some concerns," and I understood from the word might that the story she'd been told was a charitable version of his perspective. She said it would mean a lot. She said the kids needed stability during the renovation. She said Betrayal's mother had driven a long way. She said these things calmly and with the particular cadence of someone who has raised a child to be accommodating and is now surprised the accommodation has found a limit. I said I understood, and that my answer was still no. She said she hoped I'd think about it. I said I had thought about it. Then my sister-in-law's sister, the one who was going through some stuff, messaged me directly on Instagram. I didn't know she followed me. The message said she was really sorry to be a burden. She just needed some stability right now. She hoped I understood. It was carefully worded in a way that made saying no feel like kicking someone already down. I stared at it for a few minutes and recognized it. Not as manipulation exactly, but as a kind of emotional pressure that was being applied regardless of intent. I didn't respond to that one. Sunday came. I had told my brother clearly and more than once that the answer was no. I thought that was the end of it. At 3:47 in the afternoon, I heard the elevator down the hall. I don't know what I expected. Maybe that they wouldn't come. Maybe that no would simply be enough on its own, that it would be received and processed and respected. I have since thought about how long I had to actually believe that in order to be standing in my kitchen, still surprised, when I heard luggage wheels on the hardwood of the hallway. They knocked. I stood very still. They knocked again. My brother's voice. Hey, we made good time. You ready? I walked to the door. I did not open it immediately. I stood on my side of it and I thought about who I had been for 29 years, about the smaller bedroom and the car on weekends and every Thanksgiving, about the 4 days of quiet I'd had in this place and how it was the first quiet that had ever been entirely mine. Then I opened the door. My brother was standing there in a polo shirt, car relaxed, holding a travel mug. Behind him, his wife with that expression she gets when she's decided to be gracious about an inconvenience. 3 children, ages 8, 6 and 4, who immediately looked past me into the condo. Behind them, his mother-in-law, who had been to my apartment once before for a holiday gathering and had spent the evening commenting on my lack of a dining table. And behind her, a woman I'd met twice, Brielle's younger sister, carrying what appeared to be a very large duffel bag. We can't come in, I said. My brother blinked. What? My answer hasn't changed. I said no. I meant it. Brielle's face went through several things quickly. My brother's face did only one thing. It hardened. We drove 90 minutes, he said. I told you not to. I thought you'd come around. I didn't. The mother-in-law said something low to Brielle. The youngest child asked if they were going to the beach. The older 2 had started a quiet argument over something in one of the bags. So what are we supposed to do? My brother said. I think you should have figured that out before you drove here, I said. I told you 2 days ago. This is unbelievable. He said it like I'd done something to him. I said, I know this is hard. I'm sorry the timing is bad. But this is my home and I asked you not to come and I need you to not come in. What followed was about 8 minutes that I will not detail entirely because they blur into each other. There was some raised volume. There were things said about family loyalty that were unfair and that I let pass. The mother-in-law made a comment about young people these days that I also let pass. Brielle said almost nothing, which in retrospect I think was her being more self-aware than her husband in that moment. The youngest started crying, confused, because children understand atmosphere even when they don't understand the words. I felt terrible about the child crying. I want to be honest about that. I didn't feel terrible about the answer. My brother said he'd never ask me for anything again. He said it the way people say things when they want them to be wounded. I said, I understand. I'm sorry this happened this way. They left. It took another few minutes of standing in the hall before they actually moved toward the elevator. But they left. I closed my door. I locked it. I went to the kitchen and poured water that I didn't drink and stood at my counter for a long time. That evening I sent my brother a text. I said I loved him and I hoped they found a good solution. I said I was sorry the renovation was stressful. I said when things settled I'd like to have dinner, just us, and talk. He read it and didn't respond. My mother called again Monday. This time she sounded less like a mediator and more like herself, which is somewhere between hurt and resigned. She asked me how I could do that with the children standing right there. I said I hadn't wanted them to come in the first place and had said so clearly. She said family doesn't operate on technicalities. I said I didn't think a simple no was a technicality. We went in circles for about 15 minutes, and then she said she needed to go, and we said I love you the way we always do at the end of calls, regardless of what happened in the middle. I spent that week in a strange mood, not guilty exactly, not satisfied either, something more like the feeling after a long swim, wrung out, a little sore but clean. I had done a thing I had never done before, which is hold a position under pressure from multiple directions without eventually finding a reason to fold. That had happened and couldn't unhappen, which meant I knew I was capable of it, which changed something small but real. My brother and his family ended up at an extended stay hotel. My mother mentioned this, not casually. When we spoke later that week, the tone implied I should feel responsible for the hotel cost. I did not say what I thought about that, which was that 3 weeks in an extended stay hotel was a real cost. But it was also exactly the kind of cost that gets absorbed when you make plans without confirmation. 2 weeks after the door incident, Brielle messaged me. Not her sister this time. Brielle. She said she wanted to be honest, that she knew the way it had been handled wasn't fair to me, that she had told her husband they should have asked properly. She said she was sorry. It was a short message and it wasn't trying to relitigate anything. I stared at it for a while. Then I said thank you, that I appreciated her saying that, and that I hoped the renovation was going well. She said the new kitchen was actually going to be beautiful. I said I couldn't wait to see it. It was the most natural conversation we'd ever had. My brother and I talked eventually. It took about 5 weeks. We met at a diner halfway between our places on a Saturday morning, which was his suggestion, and I took that as a sign of something. He was uncomfortable for the first part of breakfast. I let it be uncomfortable. I didn't fill the silence with reassurance. He said he thought I'd just say yes, like always. I said I knew. He said he realised that wasn't fair. I said it had been the pattern for a long time, and patterns were easy to fall into. He said I should have called it a question instead of a plan. I said yes. That was exactly it. We talked for almost 2 hours about the renovation, which had gone fine, about his kids, who were doing fine, about my job, about the condo, about nothing in particular for a while. It was not the warmest breakfast I'd ever had with him, but it was honest in a way we hadn't been in years. Maybe since we were kids before the pattern existed. When we left, he hugged me, which he doesn't always do. I drove home. I parked in my spot in my building's garage. I took the elevator to my floor. I opened my door. The condo was quiet in that way it had been in those first 4 days, specific and mine. I had owned this place for almost 2 months by then. I had unpacked the bathroom. I had put a small lamp on the balcony and I sat out there some evenings when the light was good. I had learned which neighbour leaves early and which one gets home late, and what the sounds of my floor were, the particular creak of the hallway, the way the heating ticks before it comes on. This was what I'd saved for. Not just the square footage or the mortgage or the west-facing balcony. This specific quiet that knew my name because I had chosen it and paid for it, and when it was threatened, stood in a doorway and said no. That, it turned out, was the last thing I needed to make it fully mine. I've thought about that Sunday a lot since it happened. Not with regret, I want to be clear about that, but with the kind of attention you give something that surprised you about yourself. What I keep coming back to is the cause and effect of it. Not in some abstract way, but practically. My brother assumed I'd say yes because I always had. That pattern didn't appear out of nowhere. I built it, one small accommodation at a time, over years. The smaller bedroom, the car on weekends, the quiet Thanksgivings. Each one felt like a reasonable choice in the moment, and maybe it was. But reasonable choices, repeated long enough, stop looking like choices to the people around you. They start looking like facts. They start looking like who you are. That's the part nobody warns you about. It's not that the people in your life are necessarily selfish, though some of them are. It's that kindness without limits teaches people what your limits are, which is that you don't have any. My brother didn't show up on my doorstep because he was cruel. He showed up because for 35 years, the version of me he knew had always found a way to make room. He was operating on accurate historical data. The problem was that the data was about to change. What I did, standing in that doorway and holding the word no, even when his kids were in the hallway and my mother had already called twice and Brielle's sister had slid into my Instagram messages, that wasn't a dramatic act. It didn't feel heroic. It felt uncomfortable in a very specific, almost physical way, like pressing on a bruise to prove it's there. But I did it. And then I did it again the next day when my mother called. And then I sent the text that same night that said I love you, and I meant it. Because love and limits are not opposites. That's the thing I want to remember. The resolution wasn't dramatic. Nobody paid damages. Nobody publicly apologised. My brother and I sat in a diner 5 weeks later and talked like 2 adults who had finally decided to be honest. And that was the real ending. Not a scene. Just breakfast and some truth passing between us across a table. Tamsin told me early on that guilt and obligation weren't the same thing. I've turned that over 100 times since. Guilt, I've decided, is what you feel when you've done something wrong. What I was feeling that Friday on my balcony wasn't guilt. It was the discomfort of changing, of refusing to be the person who always adjusts. That discomfort is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that something real is happening. I earned that condo in the most literal sense. 6 years of packed lunches and skipped trips and a car with 140,000 miles on it. But what I earned on that Sunday, that cost something different. That cost me the version of myself who would have opened the door anyway and then resented every wall. Both things are mine now. The condo and the decision. I'd like to think I needed both of them to actually come home.